Because we live in a fiction, products of our imagination, also fictions, create our reality. My perceptions of natural phenomena and laws of physics are creations of our collective minds that I have accepted as true, but I am not bound by them. For I exist mentally in a dimension beyond the material. Therefore, I conjure events into existence by my desire to experience them. I encourage events to move in a certain direction. I alter one reality to create another to make things happen that would ordinarily not occur. I draw people, events, and conditions from absolutely unexpected sources. I originate new conditions out of nothing. I set things in motion that do not diminish over time. I live out the fiction to create the fact. I change the physical world through practiced intention. Because 100% of the future is constructed of a union of the real and the imagined, I dream my life into existence, free to create any reality I prefer. Therefore, my creativity possesses powers of its own. My thoughts collapse possibilities into realities. Morphing from one self to another, switching reality tunnels, I instantly induce reality to change. With each self, I assume I bring about an alternate universe. Existing in a state of non-union, I exercise power over my environment. Independent of existence, I am able to employ any magical technology I will.
So, fantasy role-playing games. For those of you who have never experienced this, the dungeon master is someone who is not actually playing the game, but in a way he is. The dungeon master is the one that sits at the table and tells 2, 3, 4, 5 players what they see, what they hear, often what they feel. He presents the world to them, and it's all oral. They listen, and in their imagination, they construct the very architecture of basically the imagination that is coming out of the dungeon master. Everybody at the table begins to vibrate at the same frequency. There is a level of excitement that takes over all the participants. I'm not making this up. I have participated in this over and over. Not only is an informed field, the dungeon master is an informed field that tells the players, listen, everything in this village is quiet. There is evidence all over the stone court that rapid footprints have gone through the dust recently, but it's only one pair of footprints. There are no evidence of animals, bird sounds. Only 4 or 5 stone buildings are still standing. This has been abandoned for a very long period of time, and yet there is a stench, a foul stench in the air. The players just exited a forest, and this is what they see in a field. So the first thing, this picture is built, and everybody at the table is basically seeing their own version of this environment, which is put out by a single individual. The dungeon master, the game master. Different role-playing games call this individual different names. In Dungeons and Dragons, he's the dungeon master. In other RPGs, he's just the game master. But he puts out the visual imagery, and the players receive it, build that world in their mind, and in some type of cerebral interface magic starts taking over. And what I mean is the individual players become sinking so much that the more they listen to the same game master present all kinds of more evidence and things, he's basically a substitute for their senses, what they hear, what they see, what they feel. But he throws the clues out, and they all start vibrating on the same frequency, and they begin to imagine the same details in the same way. This isn't normal. This is what takes over. There's a dynamic operative in this phenomenon where a person is presenting a world It's a fantasy world. He's making it up. But he's got the details in a book or on paperwork that he has written himself. He knows that the great clue here is that the whole courtyard is filled with dust, and you can see footprints of one person that just rapidly went through there recently. That tells you this place has been abandoned for a very long time, but there is an occupant who's here right now. And so
this individual paints this world, and the receivers, the players, they in turn project in their mind a visual of the very world that this person just spoke into existence. The real phenomenon here is that by virtue of imagination, people can immerse themselves into a false reality and feel the same emotions and the same intellectual stimulation as the real world, because the human spirit doesn't recognize a difference. When the avatar isn't the one seeing something, and the avatar right here isn't the one hearing something, the avatar isn't the one smelling something, when this data is given to the soul that occupies an avatar, it allows that soul to imagine those things as if that avatar really experienced them. For those who know what I'm talking about, you know that when you deeply get into the fantasy role-playing genres, the different gaming systems, you create your character. You might want to be a half-elf archer. So your points that you have to spend in the beginning of the game to build your character, you focus on everything that's going to promote you to be able to rapid shoot your bow, to be able to fletchery, to make arrows, be able to repair your bow, to be able to do a dead shot, to blind shoot in the dark just by listening to where an adversary could be. You choose your special abilities and your traits with care, because in your mind, you're a half-elf archeress. Talk over individual person that participates in this group dynamic chooses a character that their spirit wants to experience. Their spirit is guiding the choices. They want to be a human fighter paladin who only exercises violence for good or for holy causes. So they spend their points on strength and in dexterity, and they want a higher constitution so they can stay healthier. They can hold their breath longer. So they choose special abilities that have things to do with monks and priests and all that, because they're not just a warrior, they're a holy warrior. And the individual spirit sitting at a table, all these options, goes through the books and chooses what that spirit wants to experience and builds a character, which is a character sheet. That character sheet is now a part of the law of the game. That character sheet defines how fast or how potentially fast a person can be or react. It's a measure of intelligence and charisma and constitution and dexterity and strength. These things are quantifiable, and they're given to the character by the person who is choosing these variables.
The dungeon master knows there's a priest, there's a half-elf archeress, a female, there's a 7-foot tall half-orc, half-human barbarian, there's a human 5'10" paladin, which is a holy knight in this group, and there's one dwarf who's 3'9", and he wields a gigantic warhammer that has a magical spell on it that makes it 10 times heavier 1 second before impact. God, this group of 5 are going out on an adventure. But I'm telling you guys right now, for those who have never experienced this level of imagination, to those who have never experienced the building of a pseudo reality and the experiencing of that reality with a small group of people, you have no idea what comes over that group. It's a spell. It is an interactive dynamic where this small group of people are now pretending to be this other group, and they work together and they stay in character and they abide by the rules on their character sheet. They have to use those weapons, those special defenses, those special abilities, and the individual actions on their individual terms must comport with the abilities that are within the confines of the character that they've chosen, and the character sheet reflects all those numbers. God, these 5 characters are no longer the people who work at Kroger, the local mechanic shop, the retiree who hasn't worked in 17 years and is 80 years old and still refuses to kick the bucket. These individuals come from all walks of life. They come together and they become a force to reckon with. They totally immerse themselves into this fantasy world that is presented to them through the mind of another soul. That soul is the game master. And the game master, he or she, presents them the terrain, presents them the choices, basically throws the mystery before them and these things that they've got to solve. The game master has access to all kinds of books and note keepers and binders and stacks of paper. He's got a screen in front of him with all kinds of charts, and he knows what's in the abandoned tower. He knows that if the rubble is moved from the floor, a trap door will be seen and a basement will be revealed that's full of old weapons and provisions and ancient food stuff that's already petrified. Yet there's coins in there that have been scattered because somebody's already been there before them and died from a clever trap. And there's skeletons down there, and the coin pouch that they had on their belt is down there too. He also knows that the young woman whose bare feet made those tracks is hiding in an adjacent building. As soon as her hiding place is found, these individuals don't know all that. It's their turn. Okay, open up this door right here.
And this dynamic that I'm discussing is so real. I'm telling you right now, guys, that 4 or 5 people can huddle around a table in maximum security, and they can listen to my voice paint for them this elaborate world, and they can be hanging on everything that I say. And my imagination is on fire, and I'm telling these guys all these details, but I'm holding back everything that they wouldn't know without proper investigation, or unless they made intuitive rolls. So I'm holding all this information back, but there is a force dynamic operative that puts us in our own world. I've done this over and over and over, where we would sit around a maximum security day room while 50 guys are screaming at a basketball game on TV, while another 10 guys are over here fighting in the corner because it's Friday night fights. And this is what they want to do, mostly youngsters. But God, and then other people are slamming dominoes because that's what they do. They don't care about what anybody else says. It's what they do. I mean, no matter how many times you tell them not to do it, if you ask them not to slam the dominoes, they will slam everything stainless steel and concrete in prison. So, I mean, I don't know what it is about these dudes to their dominoes, but they can't win a game without taking the dominoes and slamming hard and often busting them in half. They're absolutely destructive. And you know what? My personal opinion is a bunch of them belong there. Need to stay there. So
this dynamic that takes over people in an imaginative scenario is a great key to understanding the informed field and what is really happening in our lives today. As a game master, I have done hundreds of games, John knows exactly what I'm talking about. He's in the section right now. And for years I kept all these kingdoms and all these worlds I had built, and it ended up becoming something. I became literally famous wherever any prison I was at because people knew there were two things that I would do, and the same thing happened in both circumstances. One of them is I would run RPGs, and people from other cell blocks would come out of place, and sometimes I'd have 8, 9, 10 people around the table. Some of them just listening. They wanted to experience it. And we would go through these campaigns, and some of these campaigns would last 11, 12, and 13 months, playing 5, 6, and 7 times a week. And we would just get totally in. It's the real world is no longer real to us. It's only a vehicle to get us all in the same day room. Because once we're all in the same day room and vibrating on the same frequency, the real world is gone. We are all now in a fantasy world of my construction, and they're going through it. I'm having a blast. They're having a blast and mesmerized. They see and feel everything I described, and they suffer when they make the wrong decisions or when they get a bad roll from the dice or the spinners, whatever we're using at the time. People are equally emotional about what happens to their character, which is a total invention, more so sometimes than what happens to them in real life. Let me explain. Let me explain. Living in the fantasy world, totally, totally divorced from the problems of our real physicality, what we say is real. In the fantasy context, everybody forms these bonds of friendship that are strong. People begin to live in character in the game. The soul of each individual is invested in that artificial character, but that character takes on real traits. Characters care for each other and want to look out for each other. Sometimes greed comes out. Sometimes envy comes out when they overcome their enemies, and then it's time to divvy up the treasure and divvy up the magic items, and envy takes over, just like in real life. But often when we were playing, people would refuse to go to lunch. Then dinner would come up, last chow would come up, and people would not want to go. They would allow their avatars to go hungry. I could hear stomachs growling. People did not want to leave the fantasy world. They wanted to stay, and they didn't care what it did to their avatars. They did not care that the stainless steel seats in prison put whelps on your ass that hurt for days. They didn't care. They didn't care about the backaches and the headaches of leaning over a table and in this huge world of noise trying to hear each other in this game, because what was going on in the game had become more real than what was going on externally outside of us. We were gone. We were lost. We had built a world within a world, and then we were living in it day after day after day after day. God. In the Dungeons and Dragons context, this was absolutely real for everybody involved. And when a character got critically injured or died, guys, let me tell you, imagine somebody who has been sentenced to 40 or 50 years in prison and didn't cry, went to prison, did all kinds of things, been beat up several times, had a hammer at maintenance department go upside their face. Got scars for it. Lives in prison 10 or 12 years. They know they got another 20 years to go before they have like chance of getting out. They know that prison has really become their retirement home. Because they're not looking forward to getting out in their 60s and 70s. Life's over for them. So they don't have a retirement, a 401k or anything like that. Imagine somebody who has spent 10 months building up a character, and they're level 22, level 23. They started at level 0, and they have acquired all these experiences. They are no longer associating themselves with their avatar. It's merely a vehicle to get them to the table with Jason. And imagine when I do everything I can to undo different things in the game, but the game is strictly going by rules. And this character does something foolish, and no matter what I do as the game master, the numbers don't lie. And everybody at the table sees that that man's character died. You may be listening to my voice right now thinking that's just stupid. It's just a game. That's all that. I'm telling you now. There's a place called the Fat Ogre in the Woodlands, Texas, on Sawdust right now, where there are people that have this exact same experience and mentality. They're not in prison. They totally immerse themselves. They're gaming there all the time. Listen, I've been there several times. John's been there with me. Listen, guys, it is real. When the morning when these people feel like a part of their soul has died. And I'm telling you that that's exactly what has happened. Because this is a artificial reality that we turned into a pseudo reality. And then we immersed ourselves into it where it became an alter reality. But it's just as real because our emotions, our decisions, and the consequences are all real. And when that man's character died, it stole something from him. He cried and he mourned for weeks. And he's just one guy that I remember. Guys, it's serious. It's serious. It's the dynamic that comes over people with these role-playing games because they associate themselves to the fantasy character that they've built. And these fantasy characters, they take on substance to the soul. Yeah, our avatars are just vehicles for a soul. The creative aspect of our reality is the spirit. And in these role-playing games, it's the spirit that's living in another avatar of that individual's creation. Yeah. A world within a world. And sometimes, because of the situations that unfold in these role-playing games, situations occur where they go into another alternate reality. Then an individual soul in our reality has now immersed themselves into a world confined within another world. Guns. People have developed psychoses behind the things that have happened to them in a fantasy scenario. But the psychosis is real. The emotions and the emotional bonds and ties that are developed between friends, kindred souls in the game fall in love. Guys, I've seen it happen. Yeah, you can call it bromance, you can call it whatever. Seen it happen. The soul is free to express itself in the fantasy world in ways unlike it can do in our restrictive dungeon programming world. Because in this world, we're all told what roles we have to play. I'm a guy, I got to do masculine things. Girls got to do feminine things. And then they have their proper context. I'm not a Satanist, so I have to at least be pseudo-religious. You know, we have these conformances that we basically have to abide by. I'm not a liberal, so I have to demonstrate my conservative values. So, but in the fantasy context, all that's gone. In the role-playing games, and I know that there are many of you listening to my voice that engaged in this activity, and you know what I'm talking about. You know how real that these things can be. I wasn't just a game master. Way before I became a game master, I was doing the very things I'm describing now. I was listening to another soul tell me what kind of world I was in after I had spent the time to choose all the variables to make a character, an avatar that I could actually travel that pseudo world in. And it was I would plan for events that have not yet happened because these are fictions. And when I project that fictive energy into reality, there is something that reciprocates. Because in this reality, which is all based off a lie, remember, the God of this world is not the oversoul. The oversoul is the God of all worlds. But this world was hijacked. This world, the God of this world, is an arch deceiver. The architecture of his personality is seen in the predator versus prey ecosphere that we live in. Violence is the signature of the God of this world. It's steeped in materialism. But we have a benefactor that has allowed for the situation of using the very rules of the arch deceiver against him. From the divine immortal soul who is trapped in this construct is now able to use the tool of fiction, which is a lie, to create a truth. It is just the opposite of what we are trained to believe, that we are physical beings and that imagination and daydreaming and prophecy and all these things are fictions. It's just the opposite. It's the very fictions that we create because we are co-creators. When we believe in the very fictions that we write for ourselves, they become our reality. And one reason for this is because the informed field of the individual writes its own existence through a relationship with the neutral field of the simulacrum, which is an extension of the oversoul. It's not penetrable by this arch deceiver, by whatever it is, AIX, the Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, God, Satan, wherever you want to call it. It's a force that promotes the more visceral, the more base traits and desires, but it cannot affect the highly individualized soul who refuses to succumb to the material interpretations of reality and instead uses empathy, intuition, and imagination to build their own world. This highly individualized person doesn't have to be an adept. It doesn't have to be someone who is steeped in Eastern mysticism and somebody who is well read, somebody who has read 1,300 nonfiction reference books. This isn't the type of individual the simulacrum responds to. The neutral field of the simulacrum responds to any informed field that enters a relationship with it. And what I mean is the highly individualized soul, you and I, trapped and immersed in this continuum. If we admit that we can't do something by our own power, then that means we can accomplish things through something that is lending that power to us. That's a relationship. And the individual who thinks that they do all things unto themselves is an island, and they have completely sequestered themselves away from all spiritual help because they think that they can do it. That's not a relationship. Anybody who would neutralize themselves with desperation and completely rely on God to do for them will never receive what God can do for them because they didn't enter the relationship. A relationship means that both parties have a responsibility. When you enter into that dynamic, the highly individualized soul can freely admit that, one, I have no idea how this is going to come to pass, at the same time admitting that it doesn't even matter, because if the end of anything that you set in motion is secure, then every single step leading up to that is secure as well.
Yeah, fine. Make those plans. And then dismiss them, record them, put them in a Microsoft Word file, whatever, put them aside. Put them aside. The more you dwell on something, the more power you take from it. This is the beauty of like create and forget. It's a method and it works. Bringing things into your existence almost requires you to mentally create that image, project it out, feel the feelings of having it, also express gratitude for the oversoul that it was given to you, and then just forget it. Move on about your life. Because if you dwell on something, all you do is empower its continuance. Remember, the prayer of desperation continues, or it admits a situation for what it is, and thus continues it. So whatever I'm diagnosed with, we can do away with all medical stuff right now. No matter what I'm diagnosed with, I am going to plan events as if that diagnosis is the fiction. I am going to create that. I'm going to treat that as a non-reality. And I'm going to move forward in all things. I'm going to redo my kitchen. I'm going to do events that absolutely infer a future expectation. I'm going to build projects knowing that I will enjoy them in the future. I might make purchases knowing there's no way I can enjoy that purchase until a certain future date. I would make plans with other individuals because it will be knit into their reality tunnels too. That, hey, we're going to meet over here in Nebraska 2 years from now. Here's the cabin we're going to stay in. These are the type of things that reality requires from us. Because once we have asserted that something is true, and then we follow through on it, we have created a pattern. And one thing the simulacrum understands very well is patterning. And it will turn that pattern into a schematic of your future. And then it will give it flesh and bones and turn it into a reality as long as you've done nothing contrary. There's no blame. We are programmed to accept things we come into contact with. Yes, the default programming of our existence is negative in the collective, but in the personal, we have great power to create great things in our lives. So this video is about that. I herein share a little bit of what I know, what I've experienced. Our holospheric medium, it's stimulated into activity by the beliefs of those confined within it, a morphic field that continually generates the real out of the imagined. The architecture of reality is so plastic in receptivity that it will always produce effects in proportion to the waveforms of our cerebral transmitters. The secret is so simple. Act as if you are, and you will be. I have made a long study of the events of my life and the world around me, allowing me to make these inescapable conclusions. My experiences conform to my picture of reality, my beliefs. The outcome of my endeavors correlate with my expectation. Therefore, my assumptions of truth become the truth. Manifesting what I believe is the function of the universe. The world has no power over me. It merely reflects what I choose to see, confirming my beliefs about myself, which obey no laws, nor are they confined by them.